But he does not wait for further explanation. He feels that he has heard enough to judge this man. John 14. 6. 18. 38. Pilate returns to the crowd waiting outside the palace. Jesus apparently is at his side when he tells the chief priests and those with them, "I find no crime in this man." Angered by that decision, the crowd insists. He stirs up the people by teaching throughout all Judea, starting from Galilee even to here. Luke 23. 4, 5. The Jews' unreasoning fanaticism must amaze Pilate. As the chief priests and elder men continue shouting, Pilate asks Jesus, "Do you not hear how many things they are testifying against you?" Matthew 27. 13. Jesus makes no attempt to answer. His calm in the face of the wild accusations surprises Pilate. The Jews indicated that Jesus had started from Galilee. Pursuing that clue, Pilate learns that Jesus is, in fact, a Galilean. This gives Pilate an idea of how he might escape responsibility for judging Jesus. Herod Antipas, the son of Herod the Great, is the ruler of Galilee, and he is in Jerusalem this Passover season. So Pilate sends Jesus to Herod. It was Herod Antipas who had John the Baptist beheaded. Later, at hearing that Jesus was performing miraculous works, Herod was concerned that Jesus might be John raised from the dead. Luke 9. 7-9. Herod now rejoices at the prospect of seeing Jesus. This is not because he wants to help Jesus or wishes to make any real attempt to learn whether there are valid charges against him. Herod is simply curious, and he is hoping to see some sign performed by him. Luke 23. 8. However, Jesus does not satisfy Herod's curiosity. In fact, as Herod questions him, Jesus says not a word. Disappointed, both Herod and his soldiers treat Jesus with contempt. Luke 23. 11. They clothe him with a splendid garment and mock him. Then Herod sends Jesus back to Pilate. Herod and Pilate had been enemies, but now they become good friends. When Jesus returns, Pilate calls together the chief priests, the Jewish rulers, and the people and says, "I examined him in front of you but found in this man no grounds for the charges you are bringing against him. In fact, neither did Herod, for he sent him back to us, and look." Found innocent by both Pilate and Herod. Matthew 27. 12-14, 18, 19. Mark 15. 2-5. Luke 23. 4-16. John 18. 36-38, 292. He has done nothing deserving of death. I will therefore punish him and release him. Luke 23. 14-16. Pilate is eager to free Jesus, for he realizes that it is out of envy that the priests have handed him over. As Pilate tries to release Jesus, he receives further motivation to do so. While he is on his judgment seat, his wife sends him the message, "Have nothing to do with that righteous man, for I suffered a lot today in a dream evidently of divine origin because of him." Matthew 27. 19. How can Pilate release this innocent man, as he should? Jesus is examined by Pilate and by Herod. How does Jesus tell the truth regarding his kingship? Pilate reaches what conclusion about Jesus? How do the people respond, and what does Pilate do? Why is Herod Antipas pleased to see Jesus, and what does he do with him? Why does Pilate want to free Jesus? 128, 293. Pilate told the crowd seeking Jesus' death, "I found in this man no grounds for the charges you are bringing against him. In fact, neither did Herod." Luke 23. 14, 15. Now, trying to spare Jesus, Pilate uses another approach, saying to the people, "You have a custom that I should release a man to you at the Passover. So do you want me to release to you the King of the Jews?" John 18. 39. Pilate is aware of a prisoner named Barabbas, who is known as a robber, a seditionist, and a murderer. So Pilate asks, "Which one do you want me to release to you, Barabbas or Jesus, the so-called Christ?" Having been stirred up by the chief priests, the people ask that Barabbas be released, not Jesus. Pilate asks again, "Which of the two do you want me to release to you?" The crowd shouts, Barabbas. Matthew 27. 17, 21. Dismayed, Pilate asks, What, then, should I do with Jesus the so-called Christ? The people roar, To the stake with him. Matthew 27. 22. To their shame, they are demanding the death of an innocent man. Pilate pleads, Why? What bad thing did this man do? I found in him nothing deserving of death. I will therefore punish him and release him. Luke 23. 22. Despite Pilate's repeated efforts, the enraged crowd yells in unison, To the stake with him. Matthew 27. 23. The religious leaders have worked the crowd into such a frenzy that they want blood. And it is not the blood of some criminal, some murderer. It is the blood of an innocent man who 5 days before was welcomed into Jerusalem as king. If Jesus' disciples are present, they remain silent and inconspicuous. Pilate sees that his appeals are doing no good. An uproar is arising, so he takes some water and washes his hands before the eyes of the crowd. He tells them, I am innocent of the blood of this man. You yourselves must see to it. Even that does not put the people off. Rather, they say, Let his blood come upon us and upon our children. Matthew 27. 24, 25. The governor wishes to satisfy them more than he wishes to do what he knows is right. So in accord with their demand, Pilate releases Barabbas to the mob. Here's Jesus stripped and then scourged. After this torturous beating, the soldiers take Pilate proclaims, Look, the man. Matthew 27. 15-17, 20-30 Mark 15. 6-19 Luke 23. 18-25 John 18. 39. 19. 5 Scourging. Dr. William D. Edwards in the Journal of the American Medical Association describes the Roman practice of scourging. The usual instrument was a short whip flagrum or flagellum with several single or braided leather thongs of variable lengths, in which small iron balls or sharp pieces of sheep bones were tied at intervals. As the Roman soldiers repeatedly struck the victims back with full force, the iron balls would cause deep contusions, and the leather thongs and sheep bones would cut into the skin and subcutaneous tissues. Then, as the flogging continued, the lacerations would tear into the underlying skeletal muscles and produce quivering ribbons of bleeding flesh. 294. Jesus into the governor's palace. The body of troops gather and heap further abuse on him. They braid a crown of thorns and push it down on his head. The soldiers also put a reed in Jesus' right hand and put a scarlet-colored robe on him, such as is worn by royalty. They say with scorn, Greetings, you King of the Jews. Matthew 27. 28, 29. More than that, they spit on Jesus and keep slapping his face. Taking the sturdy reed from him, they hit him on the head with it, driving deeper into his scalp the sharp thorns of his humiliating crown. Jesus' remarkable dignity and strength through all of this so impresses Pilate that he makes another attempt to absolve himself, saying, See, I bring him outside to you in order for you to know that I find no fault in him. Could Pilate think that bringing Jesus out now, bruised and bleeding, would move the crowds to relent? As Jesus stands before the heartless mob, Pilate proclaims, Look, the man. John 19. 4, 5. Though battered and wounded, Jesus displays a quiet dignity and calm that even Pilate must acknowledge, for his words seem to mingle respect with pity. Pilate attempts to free Jesus. The Jews ask for Barabbas. Jesus is mocked and mistreated. How does Pilate attempt to have Jesus released and thereby absolve himself of responsibility? What is involved in being scourged? After Jesus is scourged, how is he further mistreated? 129. Despite Jesus having been viciously abused and ridiculed, Pilate's efforts to release him do not move the chief priests and their accomplices. They want nothing to prevent having Jesus put to death. They keep shouting, To the stake with him! To the stake with him! Pilate responds, Take him yourselves and execute him, for I do not find any fault in him. John 19. 6. The Jews do not convince Pilate that Jesus is worthy of death on a political charge, but what about a religious one? They fall back on the charge of blasphemy that was raised at Jesus' trial before the Sanhedrin. We have a law, they say, and according to the law he ought to die, because he made himself God's son. John 19:7. This is a new charge for Pilate. He goes back into his palace and tries to find a way to release this man who has borne up under severe treatment and about whom Pilate's own wife had a dream. Matthew 27:19. What of this new charge that the Jews are making? That the prisoner is God's son. Pilate knows that Jesus is from Galilee. Luke 23:5-7. Yet he asks Jesus, "Where are you from?" John 19:9. Could Pilate be wondering whether Jesus might have lived before and, in some sense, be of divine origin? Pilate had heard directly from Jesus that he is a king, but that his kingdom is no part of this world. Not needing to elaborate on what he earlier said, Jesus remained silent. His refusal to reply stings Pilate's pride, and he indignantly says to Jesus, "Are you refusing to speak to me? Do you not know that I have authority to release you and I have authority to execute you?" John 19:10. Jesus says simply, "You would have no authority over me at all unless it had been granted to you from above. This is why the man who handed me over to you has greater sin." John 19:11. Jesus likely does not have in mind one specific individual. Rather, he means that Cephas, his accomplices, and Judas Iscariot bear a heavier responsibility than Pilate does. Impressed by Jesus' comportment and words, and increasingly fearful that Jesus may be of divine origin, Pilate tries again to release him. However, the Jews bring up another fear that Pilate must have. They threaten, "If you release this man, you are not a friend of Caesar. Everyone who makes himself a king speaks against Caesar." John 19:12. The governor brings Jesus outside once more and, sitting on the judgment seat, tells the people, "See, your king." The Jews will not relent, though. "Take him away. Take him away. To the stake with him," they shout. Pilate pleads, "Shall I execute your king?" The Jews have long chafed under Roman rule. Still, the chief priests boldly assert, "We have no king but Caesar." John 19:14-15. Cowardly caving in under the Jews' relentless demands, Pilate hands Jesus over to be executed. The soldiers strip the scarlet-colored cloak off Jesus and put on his outer garments. As Jesus is led off, he must bear his own torture stake. It is now well into the morning of Friday, Nisan 14. Jesus has been awake since early Thursday morning and has suffered one agonizing experience after another. As he struggles under the weight of the stake, Jesus' strength gives out. So the soldiers force a passerby, Simon from Shroud in Africa, to carry the stake to the place of execution. Many people follow. Some Jesus is handed over and led away to die. Matthew 27:31-32, Mark 15:20-21, Luke 23:24-31, John 19:6-17, 296, beating themselves in grief and bewailing what is happening. Jesus says to the grieving women, "Daughters of Jerusalem, stop weeping for me. Weep instead for yourselves and for your children. For look, days are coming when people will say, 'Happy are the barren women, the wombs that did not give birth and the breasts that did not nurse.' Then they will start saying to the mountains, 'Fall over us,' and to the hills, 'Cover us over.' If they do these things when the tree is moist, what will occur when it is withered?" Luke 23:28-31. Jesus is referring to the Jewish nation. It is like a dying tree that still has some moisture left, for Jesus is present and so are a number of Jews who believe in him. When these are taken out from the nation, only a spiritually withered national organization will remain, being like a dead tree. There will be intense weeping when the Roman armies act as God's executioners against that nation. Pilate tries to release Jesus. Jesus is condemned and sent to die. The religious leaders make what charge against Jesus? Why does Pilate grow fearful?